Tonight is Food Dehydration 101. Everybody's probably bought some of the expensive prepared dehydrated camp food and been disappointed by the quality or the portion size or the amount of sodium in it and or how expensive it is. Tonight, we're going to have an opportunity to hear about how to dehydrate food yourself. And we're going to have a presentation by a couple of different people. And first, we're going to hear from Kathy, who has been a rover for 5 or 6 years. She's backpacked the Grand Canyon, the Gila Wilderness, Zion, the Canadian Rockies, the Sawtooth Mountains, the Superior Hiking Trail, and more. She's really excited about the possibility of doing the Pemi Loop in New Hampshire this fall. Her longest hike was 13 days in Yellowstone, carrying a lot of dehydrated meals that she had prepared for herself. Michael is also going to be talking about dehydrating. He's been dehydrating for more than 10 years for home and camping use, and over this time he's done dozens of wilderness trips, including completing the Ontario Parks Northwest Quest in 2019. His quest included a 9-day fly-in, train-out trip to Wabikimi, a 6-day trip to the Quetico with his then 13-year-old daughter, brave man, and a grand finale 13-day solo trip into Woodland Caribou. All of these were outfitted with home-prepared, mostly dehydrated kinds of meals. So Kathy and Michael have had a lot of experience with this. Once they're done with the presentation, Gary is going to tell us a little bit about how he's prepared much larger quantities of dried food for larger group trips. And then we're going to open it up and have people share their ideas. And one thing that I'm asking people to do is email me if they have favorite recipes for dehydrated food, because we're going to put together a resource on the website so that people can try out and see what kinds of recipes other people are doing. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over first to Kathy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Rovers, for giving me this chance to talk about food dehydration. I've really never had a chance to talk much about it. I'm very curious to know what other people's techniques and tips might be. But I'm going to give you an overview of the equipment that I use and the process that I use, and then just maybe a few words about my very favorite dishes. So to begin with dehydration, you need a dehydrator. This is the Garden Master, and I think it's like the #1 seller. You can find these lots of places. I bought this many years ago. It's durable. I know it's around on Amazon and different places, but it's a very simple machine that has a topper on it, this, and then it has these trays in the middle, and you can stack these up quite high, I guess, but I've only used, 4 or 5. And then just the way it works, there's this unit at the bottom that has, I think, a small heating element and a fan. And so when you stack them all up with the cover, it has, the right air movement and temperature to dehydrate food quickly. It does have a thermostat. If you're interested in using that, you can maybe look at the instructions. But every time I've used this, I just put it in the middle, and that's all I worry about. I'm not convinced it matters. I've just always set the temperature at the middle. And so you would prepare food, of course, and you would put food usually on these trays. You'll need these inserts also. Anything liquidy really needs one of these because you can't have food dripping down through the machine. I advise whatever food you're dehydrating to keep the layers pretty thin. If you have thick spots or do it very thickly, it's just going to take you a lot longer to dehydrate. And I just don't think it dehydrates as well. So thin layers are good. You can also get these inserts to lay some things that, aren't saucy, but, chunks of whatever can go on these. They're really helpful. And that's really the machine. It's really very simple. As far as timing or the process, I would make a dish, set up the trays, usually in the afternoon, and let it dehydrate overnight. A lot of things will get done overnight, maybe a little longer. You can tell something's done really just by eye, when it's all dried up, when there's just no moisture. And it might seem a little weird because a lot of foods will still have, fat in them. I mean, I've cooked dishes with butter or coconut milk or meat. That fat will remain, but all the other food particles are really quite dried up. And that's really when it's done. The other thing I do before I ever use these and get my machine out, I run all the trays and inserts through my dishwasher on the sanitizer level, just to make sure these are clean when you go to use them. So then, once you have some food dehydrated, you'll want to pack it up for backpacking. In the past, I've used these smaller bags. They're heat resistant, they can hold a hot liquid because you'll be using boiling hot water when you rehydrate. And there's things like this. I don't know where I got these, but they're light. And this is actually one of the meals I made. This is chili mac. It's probably a year old. It's been in the freezer, and I would still use it if I went out this spring or summer. I think they really last a long time. But recently I discovered this new bag that I really like. It's the OG, and it's silicone. I really like it because it stands up really nicely. It holds heat really well. When you lock it up, it's going to hold the heat, the hot water that you put in there. So you can maybe rehydrate it longer. And when you go to eat it, it's still hot. I really like that. It washes up really great. You can hang it on your bag. It'll roll up like this. And it's made by a company in Colorado, which I like, And the other great thing is I'm using this at home too. It's not just for backpacking. This is so reusable and so durable. I'm using it at home too and just getting more uses out of it. So that's my pitch on the bag I like, the OG. So then we get into rehydrating. Okay, so you have your food packed either in baggies or whatever you're carrying it in. And what I've done, I add moisture to a meal, maybe like an hour before I'm going to eat. I have found, just the extra time does help. But that helps. But you don't want to add too much. If you've used dehydrated food, you kind of know this. I really don't like it if it gets real soupy. So I might start hydrating, kind of pre-hydrating with just a little moisture to get it going. And then you'll want to add boiling hot water as you're preparing to eat. Seal up the bag, whatever you're using. And I leave it sit at least 20 minutes for rehydration. That's really it. That's very simple, right? I know Mike will have other things to say. I'm just going to mention my favorite dishes. Oh, and just this number one tip when it comes to dehydrating food. Keep the food bits pretty small. Pretty small. Any big chunks of anything, it's going to either take a long time to rehydrate or it'll be such a big, chunky, chewy thing. You want smaller bits of food that will dehydrate and rehydrate the best. So what I call shredded beef with some sliced carrots, I'm going to chuck roast, cook it like you would at home, with any seasoning you want, with any kind of sauce or gravy you want. Cook it until tender so you can shred it into, stringy bits of beef. And that really does well. you know, the gravy and sauce comes right back. The meat isn't too tough. It works great. And then you can get the instant mashed potatoes to go with it. And you have meat and potatoes out in the forest when you're hungry. That was really great. I've also done a great coconut curry. Coconut milk bases do beautifully. Again, cook it just like you would at home with any spice you want. And again, keep the food small, like French cut green beans do really well. Slices of zucchini, onion does really well. Peas, small cubes of tofu, shredded chicken. But one thing you don't want to ever really get into your food, I think, is corn. Corn kernels turn into plastic bits and they stay plastic. It's really crazy. They're really kind of inedible. So I would never recommend any kind of corn. Yeah, those are my favorite dishes and the equipment I've used and my technique. And I can hand it off to Michael.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, so I have all my stuff out here, which in a normal presentation, that would be great, but I've not rehearsed this, so I'm not sure how I'm gonna do it. I think what I'm gonna do is give you a little tour of my table here. And so when you see me reaching, you'll kind of have an idea. Let me see here. All right, so yeah, so this is my dehydrator and dehydrating equipment here. Then I've got a bunch of dehydrated pasta and vegetables, proteins. I don't know if you can see that here. And then some store-bought dehydrator frozen items here. Thank you. My assistant showed up. So these are just store-bought. Some things you just can't dehydrate. So I'll go through a little bit of this stuff here. And then my books, and I'll cover those as well. So this is my little presentation. Thank you, Tammy. All right. Hopefully I didn't make anybody motion sickness there. Oh. My other assistant is giving me pointers over here. Let's switch to my, okay. So yeah, like as Fran mentioned, I've been doing this for a little over 10 years. I'm an analyst in my day job, so I'm very analytical, very process oriented. So you're going to see a lot of that here today. Some of the topics we cover is just the why, the tools, notes. That's part of the process that I follow, processes that I've developed. Try not to, it's hard to avoid sometimes, but try not to learn the same lesson twice. So I take a lot of notes. Some quick tips: proteins, starches and grains, vegetables, some meals that you can get right off the store shelf, and other don'ts and can'ts. Why I dehydrate. So I think it was the first 2 boundary water strips that I went on solo were really rough. Late spring, I was out for one of the reasons I was going out to the boundary waters was to get some lake trout. It was cold, rainy, windy. I just learned how to paddle a canoe. So I was really at my wit's end. The second trip, I was heading through some of the Cavity fire and some of the Ham Lake fire. So I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's a little bit nerve-wracking when where do you put your food when there's no trees? So so it was really tough. I found myself, and I was putting together my own meals at that time as well. And I found, the meals unappetizing. And I really ended up having to force myself to eat in order to maintain my energy. So at that point, it's like, if I'm going to keep on doing this, I need to really figure this out. So since I do a lot of my trips solo, weight is a huge issue. When you go solo, you do all the care, you carry everything, you do all the chores, you do all the cooking, you do all the cleanup. So, so I want things to go pretty quick. So the wait time, space, again, I'm carrying everything. I don't want to do more than 2 trips across a portage. Well, actually it's 3. So to keep the space down, and then taste, going back to what I mentioned before, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're choking down your food just so that you have the energy to make it through the next day. So that's why I do it. Tools, use what you've got. Spend the money on the good food. There is a startup cost to it. Most ovens have a warm temp setting. I've even heard of people putting it on the lowest possible setting, say 150, and propping the door open. You obviously don't want to do that in the summertime, and there's only, it's kind of limited, but use what you got, if nothing else. When you get into it, yeah, really the one, as you saw mine, my dehydrator, there's 5 trays that come with it. I bought an additional 4, so there's 9. It does work on airflow. So the jelly roll, switch over to. Oh, were you guys seeing my presentation? I don't think you were seeing my presentation. I apologize.
We see you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, back to the jelly roll. These are good for liquids and sauces. One thing about these is they do restrict the airflow. So it'll take a little bit longer to dry. Another thing with sauces and some liquid soup type meals that you'll be drying is sometimes you'll have to peel it off and flip it over maybe to get it to dry. So that's one note about these. Let me switch back over to my presentation. Okay, do you see my presentation now? It says tools all in.
No,
Oh,
I still see you. It's Melissa. Okay. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh,
all right.
There you go.
Now?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. So the dehydrator is, as long as it is a good idea to have the adjustable temps. There are some things, herbs for one, you don't want to. The purpose of dehydrating it isn't obviously to cook them. So some things like herbs, you'll want the lower temps for animal proteins and I guess nuts. Some people dry nuts, you'll want the higher temps. But I'm very much like Kathy. I generally use the middle temps. Expansion trays are nice. You can eliminate them and go down to as few as I think 3 trays to be efficient. Mandolin slicer, I don't have that with me. If you know what a mandolin slicer is, you just run the vegetable or whatever over these cutters, and it'll either slice it or julienne slice it, so make it into little matchsticks. Perfect for making those little bits that dry evenly and rehydrate evenly. Cut resistant gloves. You can throw away that little fitting that you're supposed to use to push the vegetable across. You waste too much food in my opinion. A digital scale. Yeah, somebody earlier asked, how do you know how much water to add? I'll go over that in a little bit. And so that's a big thing with a digital scale. Also, I know, for example, pasta, a good serving size of pasta is 90 grams. Well, 90 grams of orzo is very different than, measuring it. 1 cup of orzo is very different from, fusilli or anything else. So I do weigh my food whenever I can. Measuring cups and spoons, canning funnel to help you transfer the food. the dried food into your storage, supplies, basically, most things that most people have in their homes. And then the books. My favorite is the Dehydrator's Bible. It's updated, it's modern. She has meal plans, for camping. It's a very large variety of vegetarian and the non-vegetarian meals. So that's my favorite. Backcountry Kitchen, learn a lot from that too. So that's a close second. Let's see here. Okay, my notes. There's a lot of whys here. Raw, raw, cooked, dehydrated, rehydrated. If you know how much you need in the end of dehydrated vegetables, it's good to know how much you need raw. Cooked, okay, maybe not so important, and then rehydrated. These numbers here, if you see my mouse, I was packing for the 4 of us for a trip, and I've got 2 sets of pots. I was going to bring the smaller set, but then I realized, one of the dishes that we had was never going to fit in those pots. So, I knew how much it was going to be in the end. So based on the information that I had, I decided I needed to bring the bigger set of pots. These other things, again, just good to know as you're doing this over and over. And then this is more for recipes. I'll show you an example. So the dish, and I keep what inspired the dish, just in case you ever have to go back to the drawing board. I'm really bad at, cookbooks are for inspiration. But that really doesn't work for camp cooking. The last thing you want to do is make something up in March that you're not going to eat until April or May or June and forget how you made this fantastic meal, because it doesn't usually come back together very well. Preparation, things like, cheesy grits. You could put the grits and the cheese powder together, but what you'll end up with is a cheese-coated pan and half-done grits. So you want to package those things separately. So just things to keep in mind. That's a real-world experience. So that's good. But one good thing about notes is knowing how things worked or didn't work, and making adjustments. I'm going to switch. So I don't know if you can see this. This is one, you can't really see this. This is one example of beef stroganoff in my notes. The inspiration, I just stapled to it, which is beef stroganoff. It's just McCormick's beef stroganoff. Another one, I'll talk about this in a little bit, is protein. I really like Gimme Lean. So this is the dehydrating notes, and all the notes that I've taken, and then the original packaging. So the packaging is going to tell me how many servings, how many calories and fat, just so I have a sense of what I want to put into an individual recipe. Okay, where's my presentation? There it is. Oh. Okay. Quick tips, planning. How much time are you planning on spending making camp meals? Is somebody else going to be there that's going to help? One thing that I don't really consider is just adding water. I do that for breakfast, but not for dinner. My idea of a dinner is getting everything done, getting dry clothes on, and sitting down to a warm dinner, and looking out over the lake. That's my idea of heaven. So I do cook my dinners. It takes a little bit extra time. How does that change on travel days versus base camp days? So my breakfast on a base camp day is going to be much more extravagant. Biscuits and gravy or huevos rancheros or something like that. But on a travel day, if you're traveling the boundary waters, you want to be on the water as soon as possible, because in the afternoon, especially late spring, early afternoon, it gets really windy, and you may be shore bound. I mean, it happens, but you want to get on the water and have some smooth water for as much as possible. So get on the water. So I do, freeze-dried scrambled eggs with some seitan. Bacon seitan is one of my favorite breakfasts. How many and which pots do you bring? No pot meals. I just mentioned that with the freeze-dried eggs. Can you prehydrate? Kathy mentioned that also. I never really thought about that. I ran into a woman, though, when I was camping out at Woodland Caribou. She showed up. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the parks, but sometimes it's quite a distance, 3, 4, 5 miles or so between campgrounds sometimes. I ended up sharing my campsite with this couple, and this woman comes up, and as she's putting up her tent, she pulls out this amazing looking dinner with noodles and beef and peppers. Let me see, stop sharing. In one of these Nalgene, it's a 32-ounce Nalgene. So she had done this at breakfast. So she'd put her dinner in here with some hot water. She was carrying it around in a little insulated bag, and she had a warm dinner ready for her. I thought that was brilliant. So you learn something every day. All right. Skip over some of this. Just adding to the corn and the tough things like the stalks on certain mushrooms, certain mushrooms, they just don't rehydrate. Peas have a hard time rehydrating, corn. So as I mentioned here, sometimes freeze-dried is a better option. A lot of times those freeze-dried items you can get even at Midwest Mountaineering, certainly off the internet, if that's really what you want. And sometimes it's great. Those freeze-dried vegetables also are good snacks. So I'm not gonna, they're perfectly fine. I mentioned the heat. More tips, taster and texture of rehydrated vegetables. Okay, bell peppers, celery, those kind of things. They're awesome for seasonings, but you're not ever going to have those as a side dish. You'll never get, you're just not going to get a bell pepper flavor out of a dried bell pepper or celery. Celery is pretty potent, as are some mushrooms. Be sure to test those recipes before you take them out to the field. Carrot sticks, as far as texture, you're not going to get the crunch. You'll get a bite, but you're not going to get the crunch out of a dried carrot stick. Starches rehydrate faster when they're cooked and dehydrated. The exceptions to this, just because it doesn't pay for the time that you put into cooking and dehydrating, is couscous, orzo, angel hair, and spaghetti, and some of the finer Asian noodles. Sauces. I have an example here sauces that dry kind of sticky or tacky. They just turn into a jelly blob. So my recommendation on those is after they're dry, you don't necessarily want them totally dry, because then they just take a lot longer to rehydrate, is fold them between sheets of clear wrap. I suppose maybe you could do it with parchment paper too, but definitely at least clear wrap. And then you can unpeel it, tear it up into the little pieces that you want. And that's a good example of where this digital scale and the rehydrating comes in. You have a weight from the can that you use. And then, so yes, you'll have the weight of sauces. Once it's dehydrated, you weigh it again. And that difference between the pre and post dehydrating is how much water you're going to add. Water weighs pretty close to 1 pound per pint, 16 ounces per pint. You divide that up, and then you do the math, and you figure you got how much water you'll need to add back. The thing about adding water back to dehydrated foods, vegetables and meats and stuff, is it's not going to take back as much water as it gave up. So just take that into account. A little bit of extra water is going to be good for you if you're out, exerting yourself camping all day long. So not much worry there. Find what works and stick with it, and grow. I should put that in there. Grow and continually learn. You learn stuff every time you talk about it with somebody. That's the one thing I love about it. The thing to remember, that I've found is stick with your brands and vendors. Hunting for the right thing is tough. It's time consuming. And then when you switch brands, you'll find, and I'll mention, it comes up later, but a lot of these, like the freeze-dried and items, egg powder, scrambled eggs, cheese powder, butter, sour cream. I'm just looking at my stacks over here. They have a lot of salt. So when you switch vendors or switch brands, the amount of salt in there changes. So then you kind of want to be careful with your recipes then. You don't want to end up with too much salt. I guess I should probably ask if anybody has any questions at this point. I'm trying to get through for the sake of time, but I do want to address people's questions if there are any at this point. Okay, proteins. I'm not vegetarian, but I have 2 vegetarians in my house. I don't care much for taking a lot of meat proteins with me on camping trips, and I find these vegetarian options so easy and so satisfying. I have no problems at all having a vegetarian menu when I go camping. No problem whatsoever. Mentioning here the Upton seitan, however it's pronounced. The chorizo in Italian is already ground. You can just crumble it up and put it in on the jelly roll sheets. Traditional size is a little bit bigger, a little blander, but that does need to be chopped up. The bacon style is awesome with the freeze-dried scrambled eggs in the morning. It's almost as instant. It's pretty much instant. 10 minutes with some boiling water and you have breakfast. So enough said about that. Corn, boca, Morningstar crumbles, that all can be dehydrated just right out of the bag. Give me lean breakfast sausage. Awesome. Again, it takes a little bit to cook. You kind of have to steam it, fry it, use a potato masher to get it crumbled. But then once that's done, just throw it on the jelly roll and dehydrate it. TVP, if you know TVP, you know TVP. Harmony House, I'll say, does have a very nice variety of TVP, flavored TVPs. I highly recommend those. And they're not technically dehydrating. Baked tofu, you bake it a little bit dry, and then I use a vacuum sealer to seal it up, freeze it, and then, by the first day or second day, the first day in, it's thawed out. I've had it last easily 10 plus days in a camping trip and not had any problems with it. It's a great protein, very satisfying and versatile.
Excuse me, Michael, what is TVP?
Oh, you don't know TVP. Textured vegetable protein. It's pretty bland, but I will touch on some dry, both vegetarian and meat-based dry bouillon later on. That'll help to give it some flavor. But just for if it's just protein that you need, if you're putting it into a stew kind of as a filler, it's fine, no problem.
Thank you.
So animal proteins, really the only animal protein I bring for food. Now I do bring dry sausages, but the only animal protein that I actually dehydrate for my meals is shrimp. I love it. It's great. Use the small raw shrimp. Cocktail shrimp is overcooked, and I don't know about you never know about the freshness. Boil it just until it's done. Cut half, and then you want it in small bits. You're not going to be popping the shrimp in your mouth or anything like that. You want it to be dry. That is so lean that, yeah, there's no fats involved with that. Ground meats of any variety, I would suggest. I mean, I've had rancid, not rotten, but rancid dried meats before, and it's not pleasant. Digestive wise, it didn't bother me, but it ruins the meal. So I would suggest avoiding the grocery store packaged ground meats. It's just too much fat, and the animal fat in particular is what I'm cautious about. Instead, buy the lean pieces of meat from a good meat market. Everett's, I love Everett's. They're spot on. They take care of you. They know their stuff. Ask them to grind it the way you like it. The next step for preparation, if it's really lean, I wouldn't really worry about this step. But if you do need to use packaged ground meat, I've done that, had success typically. But you want to cook it. Use steam the heck out of it. Get it cooked. You don't want it dry. You want the dehydrator to take care of that. While you're cooking it, boil a bunch of water. When the meat is cooked, place it in a colander in the sink and pour that boiling water over it. That's going to wash away the fats. And then when it does dehydrate, you're going to have a really nice stable product. Yeah, layer it on a jelly roll insert and dehydrate it. Starches and grains. Okay, potatoes, I don't even know how to dehydrate potatoes. I wouldn't bother. There's so many varieties out there. I'll go over that a little bit later on, but there's so many varieties. Don't bother with potatoes, dehydrating your own potatoes. Rice, brown basmati is I say it here, it's by far the best option. The rehydration time is almost instant. I mean, 10 minutes in boiling water and it's rehydrated. It tastes just like rice. Texture, it's the closest. Yeah. Not a fan of the same with white rice or instant. I avoid that. Pasta, I think I mentioned it earlier. The larger pastas, it is a good idea. This is another thing that I've learned more recently. But cook the pasta ahead of time. It dehydrates to almost the same shape, the same weight, and everything as it was when it was cooked. But I have tested it, and again, it just rehydrates almost just hot water. I mean, it rehydrates so quick. It's great. Vegetables, don't skip the parboiling. It not only kills the bacteria, but it also partially cooks that outside layer of the food, which can get tough when you rehydrate. I've found, I think Kowalski's anyways, has these spiral or noodled vegetables like beets and winter squashes. You just toss them in. They rehydrate really well. Carrots, beets, radishes, mushrooms. That 1/8 inch julienne slicer is awesome. If you want a little bit more bite, like if you're going to put it in a stew or something, you can certainly make them thicker, but they will take a little bit longer to cook. I mentioned here again, discard the stalks of anything other than cremini or white mushrooms. I'd say throw away the stalks. And I know Barry's probably over there, wondering about, some of these mushrooms that are nothing but stalks. I've not experimented with oyster mushrooms or what is lobster mushrooms or anything like that. So I can't really speak to that. Yeah, frozen style green beans right out of the package, corn and peas. The skins on those can take a little bit longer to rehydrate if you're using them in a stew. If you haven't noticed, I'm kind of a fan of stews when I'm out camping. When it's cold out and the moisture, it's just, it sticks with you overnight. It feels good. Broccoli, cauliflower, real simple, small florets. The first inch or two of the stalk is fine. You may use a slicer or a peeler. If you want to get rid of the skin on some of the other stalk and dehydrate it, that would probably be fine. And I guess it's a pattern here, a little bit off the dehydrating track, but kombu, seaweed, I've found that to be an awesome vegetable. Soup, stews, the texture, I really enjoy kombu. And it's already dry when you get it. Any Oriental store is going to have that. The tomato, used in so many ways, prepared in so many ways. I think I already spoke about the sauces and everything. Bits and pieces, go with the canned. It's fine. If you want the fresh, that's totally fine too. I wouldn't worry too much about I'm not sure what to say about the peels. Test it out. You may want to peel the tomatoes. That may sound crazy. If you've never done it before, just drop a tomato in hot water and the peel just comes right off. So shortcut if you want to take that. You get what on the diced tomatoes, I have found, here's the analyst coming out. Kirkland, they have more water, less tomatoes in their cans of diced tomatoes. So it may be cheaper, but you're not getting what you're paying for. Tomato powder, I've not used it. I've heard lots of great things about it. I imagine the rehydration is fast, but I've not. It's kind of expensive. So I would love to hear what other people have experienced with that. Off the store meals, these tasty bites, one good bean, madras lentils, chickpea masala, all these things are awesome meals. Again, they're kind of soupy. If one package isn't enough, you can add rice and a cheese stick and you've got a complete meal. You could certainly do something like that with some hot water for lunch when you're traveling, or a quick dinner. They're really convenient and tasty. And here again, I mentioned this too, the difference in the weight from the beginning, pre-dehydration to the post, is the amount of water. All right. Don't or can't. Onions, I've done it. And it took quite a while to get the smell out of the house. So, and yeah, it's so cheap. That's another thing. Don't bother. Hash browns, you can get those at Costco, diced and sliced. I've got a vendor that I'll mention in a minute that has those mashed, any grocery store. Eggs. So, okay, so I already mentioned that I have vegetarians in the house, and I have found this Mountain House. I emailed them, talked to them, and they don't have room on their shelf for just plain scrambled eggs. That might have changed in the last couple of years. since I've talked to him, which I think that's just strange. But I have found Saratoga Farms has just freeze-dried scrambled eggs. So everybody gets to make their own. You know, some people might like sausage, bacon, you know, vegetables, mushrooms, or no mushrooms. So everybody gets to make their own. It is vegetarian, so it's great. Powdered scrambled eggs sounds strange, but if you do, you know, if you want to fry up your scrambled eggs, there is a good Augustin Farms has that whole egg powder. That's good for breads and for fish coating. If you're going to fry up some fish, dairy, cheese powders, milk powder, sour cream, butter powder. Yes, you know, they do. There is a real butter powder and sour cream cheese. It's all available. And it's not something really that you can dehydrate yourself. And other things, I'll skip that. But, you know, from the bulk section of co-ops and stuff, there's a lot available there too that you can use for meals. Bouillon, this is the bouillon I was talking about earlier. Frontier Co-op brand vegetarian. I tested 3 or probably 4 different varieties with my family, and we just like sat around and drank this soup base and tested kind of both how much per cup and which brand everybody liked, and we all came down to this Frontier brand. It is a co-op. I think it's in Iowa, I think. They got tons of great stuff. They supply a lot of the co-ops here, and the bulk section in a lot of the co-ops here. Great products. I buy each of these varieties, non-chicken, non-beef, and vegetable by the pound. We use it quite a bit. This Orrington Farms, that's the meat bouillon that I used to use, and that is very good too. All of these are dry because that's the point of dehydrating. You'll want like a bouillon base powder. These are probably in order of what I prefer. This Harmony House is a great company, just a really great, environmentally friendly, sound. They're really committed to the quality of their product. Let me just, my disclaimer, I don't mean to sound like a marketing pusher, but as I've mentioned, I've spent a lot of time trying to find really good, dependable, tasty, healthy products. And so this is what I use. Who's Your Hill Farm, a little bit more limited supply, products, but still lots of cheeses, peanut butter. One thing I'll say about peanut butter, it sounds strange, and I think we're seeing it more and more as a protein in stores, but this peanut butter powder, believe it or not, yes. Get the jelly, the fruit rolls and a tortilla, and you have an instant, easy peanut butter and jelly sandwich. 2 of those, lunch is done, you're on your way. And it's also awesome with a chocolate breakfast shake. Oh, 2 thumbs up. Okay, Augustin Farms, that's what I mentioned earlier. The only place that I've found to have scrambled, no, sorry. That's Saratoga. So Saratoga Farm, freeze-dried. One thing about, I don't know if you can see me on my individual camera, this miso soup, this company, the packet, they have individual packets of miso soup. Wow. Again, soup, but miso soup, individual packets. It's awesome. For traveling lunches, you have a thermos with hot water in the morning, stop for lunch, get a bowl, soup, hot water, hot meal, you're on your way. It's great. Milk, this milk you can drink. I don't know if anybody's ever had it. It tastes great. And it is, yeah, it's whole milk. So let me, okay, this is towards the end of my presentation. My favorite Base camp is biscuits and gravy, I mentioned. Travel day, there's the scrambled eggs. Lunch, tofu roll-up. On cold days, it's the ramen. And dinner is the beefish barley stew with caraway dumplings. Yum. Okay, last one. Don't feed the wildlife. Keep your campsite clean. All right, sorry, I probably ran over. I love this stuff. I welcome any questions, any phone calls, whatever. Contact me anytime. I'm happy to talk about it. Over and out.
Thanks, Mike. It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Next, we'll come to questions in a minute, but next, I want to ask Gary to talk a little bit about what he's done with cooking for some large groups.
What time is it?
Okay. I've been doing rover trips for a very long time, going back into the 70s, early 80s. And back then, food dehydration was a little less technical and a little more home-based. We also did a lot of significant trips, 2-3 week trips, 21 days on the Mississippi River, 8 people. And we weren't doing food for one person, we were doing food for the group. So you get into, well, that's 4 big Duluth packs worth of food. And we dehydrated almost all of it, other than the few things you could commercially buy back then. So one of the challenges was, how can you do, 21 days worth of food in a modest amount of time? And several of us back then built food dryers that you'll see in a few minutes that were in the vicinity of a rec or a box 2 foot by 2 foot, using screens, fiberglass screening, so that nothing would get contaminated by metals or anything. And we dried pretty much anything you could imagine that way. I'm not going to by any means go into any of the other details. There's been a huge amount of information conveyed so far. I'm at my daughter's for her birthday tonight, and I've got on her, if we could share her screen, Greta Kreider Carlson, for just a minute. There's a brief video that I did that shows the food dryer. And I'm not going to go into the details of food drying at all. That's been well covered already. So can you find Greta's screen on?
Yeah, I made her a co-host. She should be able to share.
There you go.
Yeah.
So this is a 2 foot by 2 foot box, basically about 18 inches tall. The door there opens. There you go. And the shelves are, everything was made, homemade in an afternoon. Fiberglass screen shelves, about 2 foot by 2 foot. There's a twin to this that a gal, Jean Branby, has. So that's just a much larger unit. Well, how does it heat? There's a place called Axeman over on University Avenue that had all kinds of heater elements. So there are 2 heater elements in it. One, when you plug the unit into the wall, is on. It's about 600 watts. The second one is hooked up through a dimmer and allows me to control, how much more heat you want. We would fill that unit up with a tray full of frozen vegetables, a tray of well-cooked, drained, very lean meat, and work in the evening after work to put together a whole dryer full of things. In the morning, I would get up and almost all of it would be ready to go into heat-sealed bags. Scrape them off with a plastic spatula. We did fruit leathers. We did all kinds of other things to go along on these trips. And the key real difference really is not any of the technique things. It was just a much higher volume to be able to do trips. So any questions?
Did you have a fan in there at all?
No, and that's an interesting notion. So there is no fan. It uses gravity. Heat goes up, the top slides, so you can open up the top as a vent. And when you turn that on, you get some pretty good airflow out of it right away.
What kind of meals did you make?
Oh, gee, we would package complete meals and a day's worth of food into a large, Ziploc kind of bag. So about anything that you could imagine, that's been talked about: noodles, meat, vegetables, fruit. We would do, a whole bag of apples and lay out thin slices. This one thing that I wish I'd taken pictures of is a food slicer that made doing that so much easier to do things like that. But pineapple sliced and done, and not candied pineapple that's so damn heavy. Pineapple dehydrates beautifully, as do green peppers and as celery and all the other things people have talked about. So these were not. This was way before the era of good fancy freeze-dried meals. This was all homemade, good quality food to feed a group of adventurers.
Hey, well, thank you, Gary. I'm going to look and see. There have been some questions in the chat that we may go back to, and some suggestions. One person asked about dehydrating baked products, and I'm not really sure what they had in mind.
I bet you it's donuts.
I've not tried to dehydrate any baked products. I'm trying to. No, I mean I've made quote unquote baked products, bannock and breads and biscuits and stuff, but never dehydrated them.
Ancient food cake and dehydrated strawberries is pretty awesome. But the dehydrated ancient food cake doesn't get any smaller though, just a lot lighter.
I'm going to give a plug. Cache Lake has great breads, pizza dough, all that, and it cooks up really well. Very lightweight.
One question that somebody asked is it better to buy dry sauces and hydrate them, or to dehydrate your own sauces?
You mean like the stroganoff kind of sauce? And
I'm
like
not.
a tomato sauce.
I'm sorry?
Like a tomato sauce.
Oh, tomato sauce.
You can buy dried sauces too. They may be salty. I don't know.
I've not tried a tomato-based sauce. I know, the stroganoff and biscuits and gravy, those are two that I would, because especially the gravy, homemade gravy takes a long time. You're going to use a lot of fuel. Those are sauces that I would dehydrate, but I'm not. Yeah, I would cook them and then dehydrate them. The tomato-based sauces, I can't speak to that one.
I do a lot of dehydrated meals, and I cook the whole meal, whether it's a sauce base or not, and I just dehydrate it all as one, throw it all in a baggie, rehydrate when I get there. For everybody, we usually share dinners. Works well.
I just want to say what an amazing presentation this was. All three speakers. It was so much information and really helpful. This is Tina, by the way.
Thanks, Tina. I haven't done a presentation in years, so I was a little bit nervous.
No, the volume of information all of you had was just so amazing. So well organized and thought out, and a lot of great ideas. And I'm like, I know how to dehydrate, but I don't do meals. I just typically dehydrate fruits or vegetables from my garden and stuff. But this kind of helps you think about how you can take it to the next level. And then I've always wondered why. I've tried dehydrating corn and peas, And that is a disaster. And I also tried dehydrating green beans, and that didn't work well either. So it makes kind of sense that some of the vegetables just don't work well. So thank you all for your preparation and presentation.
So this is Rob. I have a couple comments. One is that last year, I can't remember who donated a couple of dehydrators to the gear locker. So they are available to take out. And this would be a good time because we found that experimenting with a couple of meals and eating them at home first really pays off in terms of not having to eat that terrible thing on the field when you really need it, and you can just go get a burger instead of it flops.
I have a question about, so if you are dehydrating vegetables and fruits, I mean, okay to store at room temperature, and I assume meats and stuff you want to keep in the freezer or fridge. I mean, what about storage afterward?
I have a spare refrigerator, so I just keep all mine out there in the refrigerator. Better safe than sorry. But if it's zipped up airtight or like in either a Ziploc bag or a pint jar or a quart jar, mason jar of some sort, I think would probably be fine. What you ultimately want to avoid it doing is absorbing the humidity from the air. I think generally it's going to be pretty stable as long as it's dry. If there's no moisture, I think it's pretty safe for a while. Just in your basement or something.
I store all of my dehydrated stuff in like snap lock plastic containers just in my pantry. But the key has been if you don't dehydrate it like till it's completely dry, it gets moldy. And so I've kind of learned through trial and error. Like I typically probably over dry a little bit just to be safe.
Wave to everybody.
You guys have gotten really big. You've grown up.
She's on crutches too. She got hit by a car.
Oh, Baba.
Check that one off the list. Don't see that again.
Oh my goodness.
I just unmuted us.
This is Jim. I have dehydrated spaghetti sauce, and you end up with a spaghetti sauce leather, which is really tasty if you want to eat it that way. But to dehydrate leather takes a long time. So what I do is after it's done, I stick it in the freezer and it becomes brittle, and then you can smash it up, or maybe even a blender might work. I don't know, but I just use a rolling pin and it kind of pulverizes it, and then it'll rehydrate much quicker.
Yeah, I just say one website I find very helpful was backpackingchef.com. Really thorough. It has links to where you can buy your own separate stuff, like Harmony House and stuff. But very, very good tips and meals on that website.
I've tried a number of different things, but the two things that I really like that I've used when I go backpacking, number one is I came up with a recipe for power bars because I'm really lazy when I go backpacking or camping. I don't want to be messing around making meals. So I make power bars that I can use for breakfast and lunch. And then I have an expensive dried meal from REI for dinner. That's what I've done in the Grand Canyon. So yeah, I just put it on a tray and I can send out the recipe. The other thing I've done, which I think is interesting and probably a lot of people won't like it, but is dried tofu, because I made tofu jerky. And it's amazing how chewy it becomes. In fact, the last time I think I made it, I overdid it. I dried it too much. And it was really, really, really chewy. But it's nice when you're going on a hike and you're eating a lot of, I don't know, snack stuff and, I don't know, dried meals, to have something to chew along the way. And tofu becomes amazingly chewy, and it absorbs whatever you put with it. So whatever flavors you put. So those are a couple of things I've done. And then I've done what Laurie said, taken whole meals and then dehydrated them, and then you just add water to them later and hook them up.
I've just found, I think it's called Butler's Soy Curls. It's a dehydrated soy product, but and I found some jerky recipes recipes, and it is fantastic. It's awesome. Jerky. I mean, the flavor and the texture, and it's pretty dry, so it'll last. It lasts a while. Somebody chatted a question about spaghetti sauce in a blender. I think tomato sauce is one of those things that if there's any moisture whatsoever, it's just gonna, it's not gonna, it needs to be completely dry to make any kind of a powder out of it. I leave it as leather and then just use my scissors to chop it up into small bits. And like I said, you know, if you're not going to cook before you leave and then dehydrate it, like Lori and Barry mentioned, you want to coat it with the other ingredients, the other powders in your recipe, so it doesn't stick together, because any moisture in that tomato sauce, whatever, it just sticks. That's where I was mentioning the powder, the tomato powder, but I've never used that either. So that's my experience.
I didn't quite catch what you said, Michael, about peanut butter. On those, I know we've used the PB2, and that kind of works all right. You know, the powdered peanut butter that you can get pretty much everywhere now, but I didn't hear what you were saying.
Peanut butter. Okay. So Target has, you know, in these little snack Ziploc bags, whatever the measurement is, I just do a, what is it called? Fruit roll. You know, the fruit, the pre-dried packaged fruit sticks.
Fruit roll-ups.
Fruit roll-ups with a tortilla. And then, you know, I pre-pack it, you know, packaged all these things for lunches. So in one of those snack bags is some peanut butter powder. I just add a little bit of water to reconstitute it, and then squirt that or squeeze that in with the fruit roll-up and the tortilla, and you have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
I'll be giving that a try.
So easy. It takes up almost no space. It doesn't take much water, though.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
There's a question about cleaning the drying screens. I think I love Kathy's idea of sticking them in the dishwasher. I don't, and they're kind of labor intensive. That's why I like to use these jelly roll trays inserts. They're a lot easier to clean. I will be trying that in the dishwasher though next time.
Sure, thank all three of you. It was very informative, and I appreciate it.